Why, hello everybody. My name is Steve Usher and a warm welcome to the Experienced Designers podcast. Well, hello everybody. I am so excited to share this episode with you today. And for those that have attended my workshops or watched any of my webinars, know that I absolutely love to find inspiration and learnings from places outside of the bubble, from people doing extraordinary work in completely different industries or contexts. Places where we can take inspiration and use our own unique perspectives and bringing the learnings back into our own bubbles. And for me, this is the best learning. So when I was approached to explore this particular episode, I knew immediately it was an opportunity to create something really unique and educational. So in this episode, you'll meet Michael Flanagan and Wayne Lee from Design Bloc, a unique center of excellence at Georgia Tech in Atlanta, USA, that breaks traditional silos, bringing students and faculty from different disciplines, mindsets, and perspectives together to learn and apply design thinking to real-life problems. So think of it as an embedded centralized design function, bringing together different stakeholders from across your organization together. So for this cohort, the focus was on a specific local community challenge, working with and for members of the public when not only understanding the problem, but also creating solutions. So in this episode, we'll walk and talk you through the project, how the students approach the community, some of the challenges they faced, what learnings they took, and genuine impacts the design process had on people inside the local community, but also the students themselves too. And I invite you that whilst you're listening into this one, recontextualize what you hear into your own life, team, or business. The beauty about design thinking is its application to any context or complex problem. Deep-rooted in humans and presenting so many opportunities to grow as people, shift mindsets, and change lives. So without further ado, let's get started. So as always, thanks for listening and enjoy the show. So Michael, Wayne, welcome to the Experienced Designers.
Great. Thanks for inviting us. Great to be here.
Great to be here.
Welcome. So, really excited to have you both on the show, all the way from the US. I'm really curious because obviously, Michael, you very kind enough to reach out to me, and we had this amazing conversation that really connected into kind of my mission here at the Experienced Designers and what I'm working on around really spreading the mission really around design thinking and its application and the power of design thinking in the various contexts that we're seeing it unfold in the world really. And so today I'm really excited just to learn more about what you guys have been up to with Design Bloc and your backgrounds, and you're going to be sharing a very specific project. Which I'm absolutely certain once we've heard and we've deep dived into in this conversation, I think there'll be learning for everybody to take. I'm absolutely certain of it, and it doesn't matter what job you do or what industry. I think there's going to be some amazing learnings here. So let's just dive straight in. So Michael, just a quick introduction into yourself and your background.
Sure, yeah. So I'm originally from Georgia, been here my whole life in Atlanta. I went to Georgia Tech. I have a degree in chemical engineering, and then somehow got into entrepreneurship and met Wayne back in 2013. And from there, we've known each other for a while, right? So since then, he has kind of roped me into doing stuff with the initiative that he has with Design Bloc. And Wayne has a very interesting backstory that I'll let him tell. But I run all the marketing kind of coordination for community for us, especially now, which is why we're on podcast, what we've been doing, really telling that story because it's a good one to tell. And so, I'll shut up and let Wayne, give his intro.
Good stuff. So Wayne.
Oh yeah, no, just building on top of Michael's been instrumental with us. I mean, and he's just been a wonderful partner ever since I met him. I think within the first months that I met him, and he was so entrepreneurially minded and was like, I got a loaf of banana bread, right? So I was just like, this guy I got to keep in touch with, right? I got to keep in touch with this guy. So yeah, I am so appreciative of his help and his partnership with Design Bloc. So, but as far as my background, yeah, I mean, very, very short. I'll try to keep it quick. So I've got a background in both engineering and design, 4 degrees, fine arts, transportation design, mechanical engineering, and product design. I worked at IDEO product development way early in my career, and then my grad school studies was at Stanford University, where we were the founding class, or one of the early classes that founded what is known as the Stanford D School, the Hasso-Plattner Institute of Design.
Wow.
So actually, I have some of the original Illustrator files of the founding of what design thinking is, because it was IDEO, Hasso-Plattner, and Stanford that kind of coined that term and kind of developed the design thinking philosophy. So we were the TAs, the graduate students that were helping to kind of shape those courses, right, and shape that philosophy. So that's kind of the background as far as the design thinking part. But IDEO, product development, Ford Motor Company, Volkswagen, all in the design and interaction design, basically transportation design, interiors, what the cars look like, what the user experience is, and then also furniture and housewares for Pottery Barn. So we did a lot of work designing those products over some period of time. So that was, again, thinking about how the home is built and how people engage with how they dwell. Are they entertaining? Are they resting? Are they socializing? What's going on, right? So we did a lot of that work. And then I kind of do my own design work now. Besides being a professor at Georgia Tech, I kind of run a design consultancy. So have had clients, NASA, Toyota, Ford Motor Companies, cool. Those types of things. So
very cool.
That's kind of everything in a nutshell, right? I started teaching at Georgia Tech. I started teaching at Stanford in 2007. And I ended that when I started teaching at Georgia Tech full time in about 2014. I started visiting at Georgia Tech around 2010, somewhere around there, 2010, 2012, somewhere around there. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Interior car design, I'm just going to quickly go off on that. That must be fun to work in that now, because it's going space age. Certainly.
Yeah.
It's really interesting what's happening inside cars these days.
Well, the funny thing about that is, much credit. So I was in the corporate design, the studios, basically, right? Where you draw the drawings and you scrape the clay, that kind of stuff.
Cool.
But the interesting thing is Georgia Tech is because as a professor, I'm able to think even further reaching. So I actually have a transportation design lab in the College of Design that does advanced UI concepts. So we basically have a driving simulator in there that's made out of an old Chevy Malibu, and a 55-inch transparent OLED TV. So it is an augmented reality windshield. So you can imagine, like your BMW has a head-up display right now, and you can look at the road, and it's about 7 inches in diagonal of little different. Now imagine that 7 inches is 55 inches across the entire windshield, and it's a 10-point multi-touch, so you can actually touch it and swipe left, swipe right on the windshield if you wanted to. Not that you would want to, but you could. So we're doing advanced HMI concepts for various clients, various companies cool. that look into those types of things. Very cool. Very cool.
So look, let's delve into Design Bloc. Just out of interest, how did Design Bloc come to exist? Is it part of the university? Is it kind of a collaboration? Was it something that evolved as a natural thing and then became something, or how did it come to exist?
Yeah, I could probably give a little bit of the back history there. So Georgia Tech was approached by a private donor, and then that donor is obviously an alumnus from the university who has a similar background to me. I think he went to Georgia Tech and received both an engineering degree and an industrial design degree at Georgia Tech. And I was similar in that I received both degrees at the University of Texas. Mm-hmm. So he noticed at that time that the engineering and the design departments really didn't talk to each other that much. They were pretty siloed, as what happens in maybe large organizations. I'm sure you can relate that if you've worked in a large organization with many, many units, sometimes those things tend to get siloed. They don't really talk to each other. So that person, Mr. Oliver, decided to create a professorship to try to bridge those two units, right?
Nice.
And then so then I started lecturing at Georgia Tech. There was a nationwide search, and I was lucky enough to have obtained that particular position. And then so I started teaching across mechanical engineering and industrial design. Right, I started teaching capstone courses that tried, very similar to my experience at IDEO, try to bring more than one discipline into a common team to work on a common project, right? And so, some of the first things we were doing, one of the first projects we did was redesigning a vending, like basically an internet-enabled vending machine for Coca-Cola, right? And we had engineers, and you can think of like mechanical people and electrical people and design people all working together on that project, right? So that happened for a little bit, and over the next 2 or 3 years, it started gaining momentum, right? And the donor was like, "Hey, what could you do? What could you do broader than just engineering and design? Obviously, that's still your charge because that's what the professorship does. But what could you do broader than that?" So I, along with my chair, who had started a proposal, I wrote a proposal for what we know as a Design Bloc, which is a multidisciplinary center, right? So it's not a college, right? It's a center, and that center offers courses, right?
Okay.
So it exists as an initiative on campus, trying to unite the campus. So, because if you created another college, then you'd be in the same problem. All the other colleges would just see you as another college, right? Yeah. So, so it, as an initiative or as a center, and centers are allowed on campus, right? You have like the Center for biologically inspired things, or you have the Center for people and the internet or something like that, or Center for cybersecurity things. So you are able to create centers. And within that, I started roping in, compatriots on the campus. Like, would you like to teach with us? And we try to go across all units in that way. So that proposal then was kind of grounded around 2014. And obviously the donor was gracious and stepped up to the plate and said, "Yeah, I like this. Let's do it." And so that's what happened. Yeah.
And as far as the just so I understand this as well, so it's a kind of this center function or area is the students that kind of come along to work through the workshops, etc., and the courses. Are they coming from different parts of the university, or do they come? Yes. And that provides the multidisciplinary thinking and the different angles. Wonderful.
I mean, the wonderful thing is we've been able to do this in different ways on the campus with the project that I'm going to let Michael talk a little bit about. We're going through a course structure. It's a course. So, and because we offer 20 courses an academic year, roughly around 20 courses, this particular course structure allows any major to take the course at any year level. And it's set up and defined that way through that course mechanism. Not all mechanisms are that freeing, right? Obviously, there are certain courses that are required to graduate, and then obviously certain courses that are not, that are like what they call electives. In this particular case, the course is allowed. It both fulfills some technical requirements, but is also free and open enough that any student can take it, which is amazing, right?
Yeah.
So we took advantage of that course structure in order to basically allow any student from any major in any year to take it. We've taken a little bit of data. I think we took it over fall of 2019. Over 17 different majors are represented. Wow. Right. Wow. So it is not just engineering and design. We have more than that. Those units on campus. We have 6 units on campus, 6 colleges, and we've probably got students from every single college. Right.
What a melting pot of perspectives.
It's fun. It's fun. Yeah.
Wow. All being supported by the design process. I love it. So let's jump in around. Let's jump in around the program, because I wanted to get really into the thick of this project, because I think it's a great story, and I'd love to just delve into it and from a bit of a step by step. So how firstly just how did this project come around? What just give us a bit of a context as to how this initiative started, like how did you end up working with this community? What was the journey up to that? How was that selected?
And Michael, did you want to start off and I can finish up anything?
Yeah. So one of the things we've done, which is the course that I think really has helped us kind of highlight what we are developing now, which is curriculum for how we do community engagement as well as how you democratize design. I think that's a big thing that we've looked at doing, and it's reflected on our staff. I think when you talk about the world around diversity and design and, creating better solutions for people, it's very important to have different voices at the table. So that's something that Wayne does a great job of doing. And in the same vein, that's what this course really is. So VIP, which is vertically integrated project, which I believe is the acronym, really is our outreach to the entire community, but also the campus itself. So we will get together students from around our entire campus and work with a community partner. So in this case, I believe we talked about, and Sean is our community liaison and instructor for the course. We talked to the community improvement district, who's kind of charged in certain instances, depending on who they are, with making things better, making things more livable, really representing the business owners, because their funding comes from those business owners, which are their stakeholders. So they approached us and they talked about, redesigning those bus shelters in the area, because if you're going to, be redeveloping this whole area and spending hundreds of millions or tens of millions of dollars, you want to have things that look nicer than just a simple MARTA bus stop. And MARTA for us is our way we get around. And I say that very loosely because anybody in Europe knows that our transportation system in America is trash. So especially when you start talking about Atlanta, it works within the city, but outside of that, you're on a bus, right? So that bus system doesn't, because of politics and the nature of the city, people are very interested in driving their car around and being very self-sufficient. So that bus system and that public transit system is not what it needs to be. So with that, they asked us to, give love to the actual bus systems and help redesign that. So we ended up really partnering with the Community Improvement District, working with MARTA Army, which is, a organization that is advocating for MARTA to be better and, make their transit, work more. The students got to go out into the community and actually talk to and look at bus stops and talk to citizens. We brought the community in. So bus riders and to get that real experience. So that's really what a lot of it is. And then we also brought in a design firm, a couple, Pillar, who really does a great job of working with their, alumni from Georgia Tech. They do installations around the city, playgrounds and that thing. So really helping us kind of, once we've designed these things, take that to the next step, which is, what the real engineering needs to look like in order to put a bus structure in the ground at this place, and if we need to run power to it, how do we do that? Because I have this great idea, but I don't know how to make it work. So that's where, we start to do that. And you can jump in, Wayne.
Sure. I'll pull, Michael's got to give me a great foundation to build off. I'll just add icing on the cake, right? Yeah. So hats off to our instructor for this course, Sean Harris, right? I met Sean when he was contemplating graduate school, actually, the earliest times. And his master's thesis was designing for local communities, right? Mm-hmm. Underserved populations, underserved communities. And we had this discussion, and he had a similar background to me, right? He has an engineering undergrad and was talking about what the role of design was. So he came as a first year graduate student into my office asking here's what I think I want to do. Right. Is this possible as a master's student in design? And I told him about my work I've in the humanitarian design space. And yeah, I think there was a natural connection there. Yeah. So when he graduated, he came back to me and was okay, so I wanted to basically just do my thesis for a living. Do you know? And he has some strong ideas on what community, when we design for the community, we're not designing for, we're designing with. Yeah. Right. I TA'd for I was a teaching assistant for Bill Moggridge from way back, and Bill Moggridge would often talk about the design for the other 90%, right? Because his other quote was that humanitarian design projects tend to fail at a very, very high rate. Even though designers think they do well, they actually don't. And they usually don't because it is someone prescribing a design onto a community they know nothing about. Mm-hmm. Right. And so if you get that book, Design for the Other 90%, or you look up certain ones, you'll see that some of those engagements, like, oh, we created a solar panel system for a rural village in Nicaragua. Well, you go back a year later, there's no electricity. Why? Well, no one cleans it because no one knows how, or no one services it because no one has the technological knowledge of how to repair an inverter if it sustains a hurricane gale wind. Mm. So it's a first world solution in a developing country problem.
Yeah. So
you need to develop with, not for someone. And Sean has a strong advocacy for that you bring in the community. And obviously design thinking revolves around empathy. Yeah. So if you're truly empathetic, you should be you should not only just design, you should not be designing for, you should be involving them with the process, understanding their point of view, allowing them to participate and co-design with you in certain ways. So that allows you to truly be informed about that. And Sean's very strong about making sure that happens, right, in this particular course. Making sure the community members are engaged and that they continue that they learn the design process along with the students. They're actually part of the phases. It isn't just, oh, we're going to test with you. Okay, now we're going to drop it off and bye-bye and I'm gone, right? So, so the testing process is very, very, very intimate in the sense that the community is brought in, right? They see how we work. They're invited into the studio. All right. And vice versa. We go out into the field and we are very respectful of them when we're in the field. Right. Mm-hmm. Because the designers need to understand the context. One of the main principles of Design Bloc is both empathy and what we call contextual awareness, understanding the environment with which you design or create an intervention for. Mm-hmm. It's the same thing as trying to how do you understand how to create something in a certain industry if you don't know that industry? Mm-hmm. Right. If you're going to disrupt an industry, what do you know about what you're disrupting? Right. Yeah. So it's important to understand that that context in design is king, is crucial.
So can I just ask, so for those that don't know Atlanta or are familiar with it, so tell just a couple of things just to, again, maybe to give us some context. So what does the bus infrastructure kind of look like? So you could give us some sense of what that, and also like, who is the user group? Like, what does that community look like? What does that, just give us a sense of that group because ultimately the students were going in, spending time with them, of course, but then that sometimes doesn't, that can be a challenge that, that needs to be managed in a certain way. The engagement has to be really good, all those kind of things that need to happen from that just human interaction perspective. Yeah.
Michael, I'm going to
give us a sense of that. Paint us that kind of picture. Love to learn a little bit more about that.
So for Atlanta and Georgia in the South in America, a lot, the people who usually use public systems are usually, African Americans, people of color. So there's a couple of different ways that plays out in infrastructure, right? So I talk about how that works. Most of the users are going to be people of color, lower income, who can't afford a car, right? Car insurance is expensive. You need it to get to work. It's easier. You don't necessarily have the means to maybe, afford a car and the maintenance that goes on with that. And the infrastructure is really centered and focused on the city of Atlanta itself. There's not really expansion outside of the main city. So you can go, all the way to maybe, I think Doraville is the last stop up north, and I use north very lightly because then you have Buckhead and everything else. So you can go through Buckhead, which is the ritzy part of town. And once you get done with that, you're in suburbs. And the suburbs for years have fought against, bringing up a train line, citing that everything that people may rob them or they don't want to mix with these people. So there's a bunch of cultural and racial things that play a role in some of these systems. And so when you look at it, that bus system is not, well funded, does not have the latest and greatest buses, the bus stop is literally a stop sign post in most cases with a little martyr thing on it. It's what is it? Orange, yellow, and blue. So you got this really weird colored martyr thing that just sits there, and that's where people have to stand. And you are not taking into account, well, what if it rains, or what if somebody is carrying all these things? How do they, if they went to the store because the bus is their transportation, how do they do that? So the system is very much around those neighborhoods and communities in the city that are, I would say, probably not as affluent as they could be. And then you also have to, account for the fact that the people who are going to be using MARTA are either folks who really believe in public transit, or B, don't have a choice. So
Yeah.
it's a very specific group of people, and the folks who are designing for that have cars, have not been around these people, usually do not have any of those things. So it's a very insulated system specifically for the city. It works great in the city. You get very tired if you're behind a MARTA bus and they pull over on the side of the road, and they have to stop because they block the lane of traffic, and you're like, but it's definitely a way of life for people. So it's very useful for a very specific community and group.
So can I just ask, so when the students were engaging the community and undertaking some of the research aspects, how did they find it? What were some of the challenges that they found?
I think one of the biggest challenges, and we're having this now with our students in another project working on a community, is just not understanding how that community works, right? Most of these kids grow up in the suburbs. They've never ridden a bus. They've never been on a train most of the time. They don't ride MARTA. They don't know what it's like to be on it. They've never taken it to a game because they have that luxury. Or they just don't want to use public transit. They have options. So a lot of the issues and kind of things that come up as challenges for them are really around, how do we interact? How do we really get good results? How do we ask good questions? How do we, because if you've never been around it, you don't know what to ask. You don't know what to think about. So sometimes they end up being surprised by some of their, insights that the community can give them, or even, when we ask them a question, because they've not considered it. They consider like, well, I'm designing something for somebody who rides a bus, but I'm taking this from the perspective of the car. So the hardest thing is that, context switching in terms of perspective on how to really get into the head of somebody else who's not that you don't understand. So that could be a community thing, and the community members are great. We give them stipends for coming in. We try to, teach them and get them involved. But even with that, the students are like, okay, they're very nervous because by the end of it, when they're presenting stuff, they want to, they've built a relationship with this community. So they really do want to, be right and get it right. And then it's also a time challenge. Our course is 1 hour, so it requires a lot. It's not really a 1 hour course in terms of like the amount of work that you need to put into it, because they have logbooks and everything else. But that time crunch as well, because it becomes something that is almost a bit obsessive, because if you really do care about it, you really want to, see how it goes. And a lot of students come back for the second semester because it's taught, it's split over 2 semesters. So once a project is a whole year, calendar year. So that's really the biggest challenge I can say. I don't know if Wayne has anything else for that one.
No, again, I can just add icing to the cake on this one. I was there for for most of the reviews on that first semester, and many of the lectures, kind of helping out with Trevor and Sean. Think of it like with any kind of culture shock. When you're plunged feet first into a different country, different culture, different demographic that you do not know well, right? The first thing that people will tend to do is make assumptions about people based on their prior experience, right? And that's obviously where misunderstandings may happen, right? And so for a student who perhaps comes from a background where they don't take public transit, they've been chauffeured everywhere by their parents in a vehicle, probably a nice one, right? They have a different conception of time, right? For example, they have a different conception of time. They don't know what it's like to wait 20 minutes for a bus transfer. Now, I was designing in San Francisco for a very long time, so I'm used to using public transit because they discourage you from owning a car in San Francisco, right? So you get used to like, oh, I have to transfer here, and now I have to wait 15 minutes, and now I know I take this line, and so just that mental knowledge, we call it kind of like that spatial knowledge of all different routes and how much longer it may take than just doing one vehicle ride, right? They'll assume certain things like, well, they're not going to be staying there long. What do we need to change? You're like, well, if it rains for 20 minutes, that would probably be a problem, right? And so for part of it is them just to get acclimated into the culture, to understand what is it like to be a bus rider in Atlanta? What are the challenges and pitfalls? What is the identity of the community you deal with? And that goes with that's the charge for any good designer, because you're not as a designer, you are seldomly designing for you're seldom designing for yourself.
Yeah.
You're always designing for others.
Yeah.
And so if you're designing for others, you have to understand them. And I think that was the fun part. And it's also the challenge, because the students will make blanket assumptions about what they think people want, right? Like, so some things like this, like, oh man, wouldn't it be great to have like a virtual, things they like, oh, an augmented reality glass or virtual reality something, and I can see the bus routes in virtual reality with goggles. And like, those are all technological solutions. But guess what? People waiting on a bus don't care about any of those things. And they don't have VR goggles, and perhaps they don't have a smartphone, because again, that the population here doesn't always walk around with the latest and greatest smartphone. So just to say like, oh, well, isn't it just easy? We'll just make an app for that. You will, because the community doesn't necessarily have a smartphone. What are you going to do with that? And all of a sudden they're like, oh, what I want isn't what they want. And that as they begin to realize that over the course of the semester, and of course they will fail, and that's okay. That in design thinking, I learned at IDEO, fail early, fail often in order to succeed sooner. So the idea is that if you engage with the community and illuminate those assumptions, oh, don't you want an app? Oh, you don't want an app because you don't have a smartphone, or because the smartphone you have has a limited data plan and you can't, you're very judicious on how that is. Yeah. You're not going to have all this real-time video AR floating around. Like, then all of a sudden they begin to understand that their assumptions were wrong. But they also become more empathetic and really understand the plight or the culture of the culture's direction. And that informs their design process. Yeah. And any good designer can balance their own point of view with their audience's point of view.
Absolutely. And just as part of that research phase, what were some of the kind of insights? What were some of the outcomes or themes that you started? Anything that really was a surprise, or anything that was really popping as part of that process?
Yeah, Michael, did you? Definitely there were some, right?
Of course.
Yeah, so, like I said, some of the students saying, "Oh, VR's not going to work here." One thing was just how often, people would actually not stand next to the sign when they were in the field. They would realize like how, because if it's really sunny, you don't want to stand next to a stop sign with no shelter. So what most people would do is they would abandon the stop sign, the bus stop, and move to any area probably within about 40 or 50, yards, right? Roughly, or not yards, like feet, 40 or 50 feet maybe, where they could see the stops, so they could see the bus stop, but they would be in the shade. So let's say they're at the corner store adjacent, caddy corner to that intersection, right? But then by doing that, the bus drivers don't see them. They're not using the peripheral vision. They are doing tunnel vision. There's no one at the stop. And I'm going to blow through this intersection because there's no one at the stop. Yeah. Right. So again, this idea of, being overlooked, it gets permeated, because now all of a sudden they're running out like, no. And they're waving their hands like, we're here. But then the bus driver goes, oh, too late. I slowed down to 5 miles per hour. I'll keep going. And they just keep going. Right. And so you see that, and then you see that internalized. I must not be important. Yeah. And because I'm not seen.
Yeah. Yeah.
And can you imagine how someone feels if they say, I'm not important, I'm not seen?
Yeah.
Right? I think that was really important for many students to see that and hear that and feel that. Because then they begin to say, not only should there be a shelter there, we need to elevate and that was actually one of their insights, elevating the visibility, not of the bus stop, but of the people. How do we do that? And so that strategy, that design, what we call, it's a design strategy, right? For your listeners, right? That's what design strategy is, right? You're creating imperatives for how you will make a better intervention, right? So that's a design strategy, right? We tend to use the word either imperatives or design strategy. Let's elevate the visibility of the people, not the stop.
Amazing. So how did you then move into, as part of the kind of the prototype phase and some of the ideation? You talked earlier about engaging the community and bringing them along the design process.
Yes.
What kind of work did you do in that phase of the work? Because I think also, particularly when you've got, as you kind of describe the community, there's trust is massively important. And so it's not seen as, like probably in a lot of design processes, it's kind of oh, well, is this really going to lead to anything? Where's the trust in actually, is my feedback actually going to result in any kind of action?
Yeah.
And so, the hope kind of then starts to build up, because you go, oh, okay, so now you value my ideas as well. Fantastic. And start to bring them. So how did you bring the community along in that journey as well?
I remember being on a couple of these sessions. These were so, part of my job is so fun because obviously, right, we have a lot of lecturers that teach the courses. Besides, I'm not the only one that teaches. So I get to pop into these courses and just kind of like, be guest critic for a lot of these things, which is so fun. So a couple of, and sometimes I'm brought in. I think I was brought in. I think Sean asked me to come in and do a guest lecture on ideation, right, on creativity. And what we do is like I said, we bring the community into the process. We have food, and it's kind of like, we have catering, and we kind of it's like a fun social party, right? So we talked about what is it like to be creative and generate ideas. So in this way, the community learns about design as much as the students do. And we did gesture study, so quick thumbnailing drawings, right? How to do that, and we demonstrated that, like how to get into your creative side of your mind and relinquish your self-doubt, relinquish your insecurity, draw the first line, regardless of how ugly you may think it is. And we celebrate that, we vault that. And then we had another one where we had one of our staff members teach foam core building. Like, it's like cardboard construction that most architects would use, right? So, designers will use foam core or cardboard and, X-Acto knives and create little structures. So what we did was the community would then help us build those. They would actually be designing alongside of us. So we would draw something and they would be asked to draw something else. And then we'd compare the two, working in small teams, again, of like maybe 6 to 8 students with each community member, with a couple community members in each group, drawing back and forth, creating cardboard models back and forth. And again, we're not critiquing very heavily. We're not judging them on craft. What we're doing at this early stage of the process is to just make sure that their voice is heard in the idea generation.
Yes.
Right. Ultimately, those ideas then get further refined. Absolutely. But because you go from a cardboard model to, some kind of technical drawing, right? Something that actually can be built. Yeah. And then there is the expertise in engineering, but taking that voice in the ideation process and then coming back, because design thinking is iterative at certain stages, at the midterm, at the final, right? When now, let's say you've got, I think each team came up with certain ideas. So you had, let's say, 3 teams, each came up with their own the theme idea. And in the theme, there might be 4 or 5 different concepts. So we would further refine those, and then maybe have one concept per theme, and then invite the community in again. And the community is the writers, the advocacy group, Marta Army, right? The fabrication group, Pillar, right? So the community is everyone, not just end user, but fabricator, advocacy group, community group, right? And bus riders.
Fantastic.
Right?
Fantastic.
And so we'd have them at major reviews at the midterm, the final, right? And they would go, oh, so I remember being part of the process and generating these quick sketches or drawing these quick sketch models. And now I see what you've done with that. I like this, but this part I'm not sure about, blah, blah, blah. And again, you learn more insightful things, right? One of the things that was interesting was they said, well, what about, so they tapered off the AR, for example. And like, well, we do want a real-time interactive board so that part of that was knowledge. Like, the bus is going to come in 10 minutes and you don't have a smartphone to do like the next bus app or whatever, but there's a LCD screen there. Right. And so because that idea of I want the information real time came out of the mock-up session. But now you get into the midterm review and now Pillar's like, well, you know how expensive an LCD is in outdoor sun? Maybe that's not the best technology, right? For that particular fabrication. Maybe it needs to be an e-ink display, right? Or maybe it needs to be, just a printed piece of paper, a giant poster board, right? That may be enough, right? Because again, the level of the bus stop is a stop sign, right? With a orange, blue, yellow tag on it. So they don't even have route information necessarily in some of these stops. So then of course they can have a real discussion. And it's fun then to see Marta, the advocacy group, say, well, do you know how expensive it is to switch out papers, route information? So now we have this real cost discussion, right? Yeah. Because the fabrication, the advocacy group, and even MARTA people are there to talk about the trials and tribulations of how much funding it takes to do some of these things. And that, from a community and a student learning perspective, becomes very interesting.
I was just about to say the community then start to maybe empathize as well. They go, okay, my expectation, I didn't realize that actually would cost X, Y, Z or whatever that. That's
and so ultimately, you can now kind of hash. And again, it's a bus stop. Everybody's like, oh, it's a bus stop. And you're like, but even the bus stop is a signifier.
Yes,
is a product in a much larger system. You don't design a product, you're designing a system. And a system is obviously a complex thing. Designers usually, what we're trying to teach designers to understand, you're not solving this. Oftentimes designers make the mistake of solving the wrong problem, right? We talk about accurate problem framing, not problem solving, because you misidentify, I'm making a bus stop. You're not actually doing that. You're making a collection of interactions that deal with transportation. That's a system, not a singular thing. So because this product exists in that system, right? It exists in that system. So for students to understand the system is how we solve complex problems, social problems, right? We're not solving singular user interaction ideas. We are solving complex societal issues. And that, for the students to then see that play out in front of them and be part of it, is valuable.
Yeah, absolutely. So where did it kind of then start to hone in on towards the end? What was the kind of the outcomes? What was some of the, after a number of iterations, what did it culminate to? I'm excited to learn. What happened? What was some of the solutions that was either taken forward or even implemented?
Yeah. Michael, I've got some, Michael, unless you wanted anything that you stood from the process book you remember that stood out?
Yeah. I think some of the big things were just, the designs that became more feasible. There were some interesting ones that kind of showed up. One kind of looked like it was like almost melting. That was kind of the design. It was like, plywood and stuff like that. So it had this really interesting texture. And I think solar panels were things that wanted to be added to some of these, stops to provide power, just to, make it easier or even, cheaper in some cases to do this without having to run power right to, a bus stop, which is a whole, now I got to get the city of Atlanta involved, and I got to get all these other people involved. But I think the the bigger solutions that came out of it were really just a continued, growth with the community that we're working with and the people that we are working with, which is really always big for us. I think the solutions themselves are being carried on by Pillar and the Community Improvement District. So 2020, was a crazy year. So we finished in the middle of that. So I don't know that they've made a bunch of progress, but we are working with Pillar again on some other projects. So I'm sure when they can actually get around to maybe doing more construction in an area or whatever, they'll start to, really do it. And the reason they came to us in the first place too was because MARTA, because of the political state they sit in, that community improvement district couldn't really work directly with MARTA for several reasons. Like, it's very political in how their funding works and all of this stuff. So MARTA had gone to, gone to SCAD and got them to design cool things for them, but they couldn't pay them because they were like, well, we're a state-run thing. We're not going to pay you. You're going to do this for free. And they were like, no. So they were able to, after they saw that, they were like, we need to find a partner who can actually give us things we can use. So that's like a lot of the students' work, is part of it signed over. It's like, we'll go into production one day, but also it allows the community the people who work with us, our partners, to not have to be so concerned about, can I afford this? So it really is trying to make design, equitable for everyone, because you can get an architect to draw you a really beautiful house that costs you millions of dollars, or you can, build one out of shipping containers and be able to do it affordably. And so like it's just trying to find that level of how we get some of this real design into the community. So there's always like those fringe benefits that I'm kind of talking about. Wayne can tell you more specifically about some of the other stuff that came out of it, but those benefits that I see are a little bit more intangible and kind of, speak to the mission of what we're really trying to do and why the center exists and what we're, really looking forward to doing, which we can get into a little bit at the end in this summer specifically. So.
Yeah, amazing. So can I just ask, because look, design thinking is first and foremost is a mindset, right? First, it's and so from a mind, if you think about it from the mindset perspective, and the different, the different stakeholders in this design process that you went through, how specifically from a community perspective, how has that shifted or changed their approach, or how has that shifted their thinking around stuff? Did you see, has there been that level of engagement? Have you seen maybe some designers being born out of that who want to maybe
Sure.
take this into other areas of the community to improve maybe park areas or whatever it might be, maybe for them to engage in those kind of things? Have you seen
Yeah.
signs of that emerging?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, no, there's some amazing quotes. I mean, we obviously do student evaluations after the end of every course, so we know very well how the students are receive the course and receive the teaching. I can definitely jump into that on the mindset, Steve. As far as the prior question you asked, I mean, Michael did talk. Pillar is in the process of fabricating it. Some of the amazing things we saw that came out of that, right? Choice of materials was interesting, right? As far as making sure they were cost effective. Community engagement, having the community help design certain murals within the station, the site, or even things like using strong materials to make kind of like a tile game, or like like when you slide tiles around, something that to entertain you or use time that doesn't require electricity. Yes. But that can still allow, so little things that little touches, like how you might hang shopping bags, like little hooks in discrete places, so that you could hang. If you've just done you walk to the grocery store and you're coming back out, and now you want to take a bus back home. Just being able to hang things, so little touches, attention to detail, right? The name of the neighborhood inscribed or laser water jetted cut out of the steel that describes the station, the neighborhood that the station that the site sits upon, with a little bit of history of that neighborhood. Nice. That a lot of those things are little touches you don't expect in a bus stop. Yeah. And so there was a lot of those types of things that I thought were quite elegant and quite insightful. Now, to address your question about, and the short answer is, yeah, Pillar's making it, right? So we hope Good. We hope for installment soon.
Good stuff. Send me photos.
Yeah, we will. But as far as mindset, you talked about that. So this is the fun part, right? Because, design, you said is a mindset. And so if you think about it, human-centered design, right? That you are progressing or alternating between different mindsets, right? There's an empathy mindset, an empathetic mindset. There's a creative or inductive mindset when you're asked to ideate, right? If you use design thinking process, right? It's empathize, define, express, or ideate, prototype, test, right? So we all know that. So the express or the prototype phases are about creativity, right? So that's an inductive or associative mindset, where you're not being critical, you're just being creative, you're being playful. And then there's the test evaluate phase, which is the iterate phase, and that's being critical. Now you're using critical or analytical skill. So if we just take those three mindsets, just for simplification, empathy, creativity, critical thinking, those three mindsets used throughout the process, and you obviously alternate or switch back and forth. For students who are technology-centric, engineering students, for example, they tend to be mostly critical in mindset because that's the way their curriculum is developed. They don't have playing with art as an engineering 101 course, right? And they don't have an empathy 101 course, or a culture shock course, or a learn to live with other people course. So no discipline has that. So in that sense, these courses are empathy courses, right? And then of course the creativity, designers tend to get very creative, right? Because we give those like sketching 101 and, model making, building in the shop, craft, woodworking, metalsmithing, those types of things. They tend to be very creative in mindset, but they don't tend to get critical in the sense that you just made this beautiful piece of personal art. Is it effective? And people will go, well, I like it. It's pretty. And you're like, no, is it effective? And then you have to go, well, what's effective mean? Because if you're making personal artwork, you're really not caring about effectiveness to you. You made it. Yeah. But if you're making artwork for someone else, Now you have to care about that person's perception and that person's requirements. So the interesting thing about design process is it is all three of those mindsets and more, but it is all three of those major mindsets. So you asked, I see the students. Yeah, definitely we see the students. We see technology students who get swamped in the ideation and just are duck out of water. They're what? I don't know what I'm doing here. I haven't been creative since I was in 5th grade or in kindergarten, primary school. I don't know how to do that. And of course, that insecurity is okay. We exalt that when we say it's okay. We're here to learn about it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And at the same time, for design students or for students in architecture or maybe marketing who have some kind of creative or empathetic mind, now they're asked to be effective, right? And now they're being saying, well, yes, you're creative. You came up with all these different concepts. Which one is the best for this person? And now they have to go, oh, so it's not just because I love aluminum. It's because, or I love e-ink display or whatever thing or what, pink polka dots, whatever I'm infatuated with. It's about whether or not whatever I'm infatuated with makes sense. And so for the students on that creative spectrum to then see the empathy and the critical side is, again, what makes this class work, because you have different voices talking about things when they are insecure and when they're familiar. Yeah. And when they both learn together, that's the secret sauce of the class. Yeah.
Amazing. That was a really amazing description. Fantastic. Thanks for that, Wayne. That was really good. Really good. So look, let's bring it into a close. I'm going to quickly ask you around what did you learn from this? What did you? There's always learning in it for everybody in everything that we do. What were some of your observations and learnings from this that particular experience?
Michael wanted to,
I'll say that it's definitely one of the things we want to do more of, and that there's a need for a curriculum around this. One of the things that we've been approached by about 3 or 4 different universities at this point, and Wayne, they usually reach out to Wayne because Wayne is the guy. They're just like, oh, we have to talk to Wayne. Wayne, tell us, how are you doing these amazing things? And so one of the things that we really learned was that we're going to start, producing curriculum around this. I think when we talk about design thinking, we often talk about how it's great to be creative and make these cool things, but not necessarily how that impacts the community or the people you're even, making stuff for. I personally learned this philosophy a couple years ago when, I was dating this one girl, and she just said something that I thought was very profound. She was like, why are you buying stuff for people that you want and not what they want? And I was like, oh, that makes a lot of sense. And so I've kind of taken that philosophy to the rest of my life and said, well, what is the thing that you actually need? Because like me buying something that I think is good for you is not the outcome that I want. I actually want you to use the gift. I want you to like it. So now I just ask people what they want straight up. And I don't even try to, suppose my stuff. But that's a very different mindset. So I think like we're realizing that mindset of us trying to help people not just think about their own paradigm and their own world and designing something that's really for them to, say, oh, look what I did, not look what we did together or look what we did to the community, is a very you've seen what's been going on in America. So we're very me-centric. So we're trying to teach people how to do that in a better way, especially when you talk about innovation, because it usually misses the mark in a lot of categories simply because it doesn't use the people around that are designed for the users. It designs to, make these monuments to ourselves. And I think the second thing is the community wants to do more stuff. So we're actually currently working with our staff and students, which is why I wanted them to be on here, but we haven't finished that process yet. So maybe in a year we'll come back around and be able to talk about
cool.
that project that we did. But we're designing signs and a bunch of stuff for a neighborhood with that neighborhood. So how do we represent, as gentrification happens, how do we represent that neighborhood with these new signs and displays, and how do we help them brand their neighborhood and understand their own history? So we're in the middle of that now, and it's just a lot of learnings around how do we really, 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 teach people this methodology and how does it work? Because a lot of folks have reached out and been like, we were really reaching a crossroads and a roadblock that's very hard for us to do that. And then along with that curriculum, it allows us to reach more of the university and kind of package things in a way that are more succinct. So when other people want to compete, and I use that term because it's a university, so it's always going to be somebody trying to get more funding or something. It makes it easier for us to say, hey, we have a program, we have a system that we can easily, continue to plug and play these things. So that's been what I think is for me specifically around my role, our biggest learning, just to continue outreach and do some of these things. If we can give that, because we don't have the staff to train, 50 people, 100 people, do this, multiple times a year. That's not what we're set up to do, but we do need to do more community work and have that space.
Yeah, amazing.
Yeah. On my side of it, Steve, as far as learning, I mean, there's so many different types of learnings, right? I mean, there's learnings of dealing with as a center within a university. There's learnings of when you do something good and it's the scaling, right? Like exactly what Michael's saying. You're doing something good. You need and you want to scale, right? The scaling is tricky, so it's always something where we're always dealing with that. So there's those types of issues. Obviously, there's about how to spread the message to more universities or collaborating, because yes, definitely universities have reached out and have talked, and so always trying to figure out how to then how to disseminate that knowledge and bring it out, right, to more people is always a trick on my side of it. But the funnest part, of course, is watching the students learn, right? I'm a relatively new parent, right? I have a 2-year-old. And it is always fun when you have your child learn new things that you learned so many years ago, but you're like, oh my gosh, this person's learning what that is for the very first time, right? And that in itself is a learning, right? And of course, people always say, is that creepy? Like, no, it's not at all. Like, my child learned how to stack blocks and like build a little block structure, like a week ago. And just watching someone learn. And so similarly, when a college student gets to see what I learned in design at IDEO. I went to IDEO when I was around 17 or 18, right? So learning, having them go through that experience that I learned at IDEO around that age, is again, for the first time, seeing them see it. You learn about, not only does it gratify you, but you also learn about what you can do to make it better, right? Like, how can I make that experience for those students even better, right? Like, they learned a culture shock moment. How can I make it more illuminating? How can I make it more enlightening? How can I make it more impactful? And so now you begin to think about the curriculum and you think about the courses and how you disseminate that and how you teach the design thinking methodologies and process. And so that's, for me, that's a constant learning exercise. One of my old teachers, unfortunately no longer with us, Matt Kahn, would always say, you're a designer, right? Why don't you use design to design? So, and that basically means if you're a teacher, and you're a professor, and you create classes are your design, classes are your product. Why aren't you using a design process to constantly refine, evaluate, iterate your teaching? And in that sense, I'm always learning about better ways to make my classes better, right? Versus, say, having my class stagnate where my slides stay the same for 15 years. I'm sure people have been in school or in university where they're like, wow, your presentation is still on transparencies? Like, come on. Like, I didn't realize that you could contain knowledge and ossify it for 15 years, right? Yes, the laws of physics may not have changed, but the way you deliver them does. Yeah. So you're constantly learning about how to be a better teacher, a better professor, a professor of knowledge. Yeah. So you're learning constant new ways to profess better knowledge and give students better experiences.
Amazing. Well, guys, thank you so much for sharing this amazing and wonderful story and this journey that you've been on and are still on. I think I'm just privileged to be able to help you guys and to let's spread the word as much as we can out into the world. So hopefully this podcast will serve a little small thing of just of spreading that word and supporting this work, because I think it's absolutely amazing. I think the other thing for me is I think every organization on this planet, corporate, mid-size, SME, can learn from this as well. Your most captive audience typically is your employee, and therefore, applying this kind of mindset and design process into employee design and making workplace better, and all of those different disciplines, I think is the possibilities are endless. So I think I want to see more of that from what I do in the work that I do. And I think, we can take all the learning from this and recontextualize it to any form of industry or business. So I think it's a great learning for anybody. So, but look, thank you so much. And I really appreciate it. I really do. It's been absolutely a pleasure to meet you both. Absolutely brilliant.
Yes. Thank you. It was wonderful. Thank you.
And there you have it. Another episode of the Experienced Designers podcast. Thanks ever so much to my guests, Michael and Wayne. It was an absolute honour to meet you, and I will absolutely be taking you up on the opportunity to come back together again later this year and invite some of the students to participate in a podcast as well. And let's bring some new perspectives and other perspectives into the conversation, and I'm very much looking forward to recording that one. So as always, if you wish to connect with Michael and Lee, all of the links are in the notes on the website. And of course, thank you all so much for listening. Until the next time, bye for now.